Welcome to the training entitled Communication and Conflict Resolution, a guide for job partners. My name is Dr. LaWanda Cummings, and I'll be your guide today. I'm a psychologist, a teacher, an interventionist, and I am a workforce development and mentoring specialist. So I'm very excited today for us to be able to delve into a lesson around communication and conflict resolution. And we're going to be covering three specific things. We're going to talk about purposeful mentoring and how we utilize the mentoring relationship in the workforce and workspaces to promote development. We're going to look at communication and the skill of listening. And then we're going to look at some conflict resolution strategies and ways in which we may want to reframe the idea of conflict as something that is a part of the workplace. Now, to forewarn you, at the conclusion of our time together, we're going to do a knowledge check. You'll be asked a few questions at the end around what is mentoring, what are some of the effective communication strategies, and then what are some strategies that you've learned in regards to conflict resolution. So, welcome, and let's get started. So, the first thing that we're going to talk about is the idea of purposeful mentoring. Mentoring is an interesting topic because lots of positive relationships may occur in a person's life, but none of them are all purposeful and or mentoring. Now, as a review, the American Psychological Association defined a mentor as an individual with expertise who can help develop the career of a mentee. A mentor often has two primary functions for the mentee. In the career-related area, the mentor establishes a role as a coach who provides advice to enhance the mentee's professional performance and development. In the psychosocial domain, the mentor is a role model and a support system for the mentee. But both functions provide explicit and implicit lessons related to their professional development. And then, how do we generally set up work life balance? Now, in particular for minorities and women, mentoring programs or mentoring initiatives have a vital purpose in providing guidance, support, and opportunities to help close inequity gaps and to promote equality within workplace. Because these quality mentorships allow access to career contacts, insider advice, and tailored development opportunities that they may not otherwise have. And so, inside these purposeful relationships in any organization, it's important for us to understand that these organizations thrive in the global environment as they engage in purposeful development and recruitment of diverse employees to allow there to be structuring of the organization to be more globally marketable. This allows diverse ideas to be so that there's a more responsive product delivery as well as a space in which there's natural opportunities for innovation. So, mentoring relationships help create a supportive work environment that promotes high value recruitment and retention of employees. So, our first bright idea today is that employees at every level of a business should have the opportunity to learn and develop as a professional. So, let's talk about communication and the skill of listening. It's really important for us to start out by clarifying that whether there's two employees or a bi-coastal organization of thousands, communication is essential. It's essential for everyone in the business being able to understand the purpose and focus and agenda of the organization. But it also is important for us to talk about it as a skill for individuals. Now, having strong communication skills is crucial to both personal and professional success. And we see that most organizations are going to be utilizing electronic communication. Some are using remote and distant working or learning, and also collaborative and team models for work. And each of these types of communication may require the setup of the organizational norms and their particular expectations. For example, is there a timing expectation for a response to emails? That should probably be communicated. Or is there a prescribed place or platform for team communication and collaborations? All of those things need to be really clear to anyone that's working within an organization. because we know that through the exchange of information, people can build trust and respect. They can then align their actions, execute plans and strategies, and ultimately drive bottom line performance goals. So essentially, good communication is good business. So let's talk about some factors for effective communication because communication, again, is a skill. So learning some ways in which we can do it better is always going to benefit our organization. Now, I want to start out by talking about the art of listening because most people have the biological capacity for hearing, and sometimes we conflate that with listening. But being able to hear and listen are two very different things. According to Abrams and Grossberg from Harvard Business School, in their article, How to Become a Better Listener, it actually requires three specific things that we have to put energy into. The first being cognitive. It means that we have to pay attention to all the information that's being shared, whether it's explicit or implicit. We have to do the work of making sure we're receiving and comprehending what the other person is saying, and then integrating that information into what we know. It also requires an emotional component where you have to make the choice of staying calm and practicing compassion during the conversation. So that may mean managing emotional responses, whether that's anger, boredom, or annoyance that you're experiencing so that you can be present for the communication process. And the last one is that we have to engage behaviorally. We work towards conveying interest. We are using both verbal and nonverbal cues so that we can make sure that we're communicating comprehension of what is being shared. And inside this communication process, where we're using cognitive, emotional, and behavioral strategies, we want to be in a position as the communicator to also make adjustments or adapt the communication style so that we can ensure that listeners are really in a position to hear from us. Okay. And sometimes, especially if there is a power differential, it may mean that we have to engage in a way that communicates friendliness and approachableness, being in a position to also give and receive constructive feedback. And sometimes that may mean adding inside the conversation a space and a time for another person to be able to saying to them, what do you feel like needs to be changed? Or what would be your feedback around this communication? And when we do this, and being in a position to listen and hear from others around ways in which we can improve the process, we communicate a level of confidence that we're here to also do a good work and to understand and improve. But also, when we create space, we are practicing empathy and respect for the other person. And in doing all of this, remember we talked about behavioral. We want to be in a position to make sure that we are watching our body language, which means that we have to be reflective. And so we have to strive for congruence between what we're saying with our mouths and our nonverbal communication. So, in our commitment to actually be an active listener, you may have to pause and assess whether your posturing is communicating a different message from what you're saying. And as you can see here from the picture, sometimes we can be in a position where we are defensive or annoyed, irritated, happy, confused, worried. All of these things are not only communicated in tone and in the words that we use, but in the way in which we hold our bodies. And so, our bright idea from this is that we want to master the utilization of words because words have power. But developing a strong communication skill set is a long-term goal. And you will be doing that, throughout your career, figuring out how to navigate and manage and to work with different teams. Now let's talk about conflict resolution. Section 4, conflict resolution, and the actual word conflict usually elicits a strong negative reaction from people because we've all had moments in which we have had incongruence between us and another person's ideas, or there was miscommunication around expectations. But what I would ask you to do is let's work on reframing this idea around conflict because conflict, if it's used correctly, can be a force for innovation and it can be a force for positive change. Sometimes systems or ways in which we've been doing things don't really work. And the conflict is data or an indicator that we need to reassess and think about how things can be done differently. Now, there are four top reasons for why there is conflict inside workspaces. And those include poor communication. Number two is unclear performance expectations. Number three is time management issues. And four is the cloudy definition of employee roles. And when we're in the business of figuring out how do we get to a place of congruence around how we think or feel or what is being communicated, we have to first do some reflective processes where we learn to accept the differences among staff. And those differences could be personal characteristics, which would include things like cultural background, language, gender identification, beliefs and ideas, or maybe even work aspirations. Or it could be professional experiences like educational background, the skill level and prior experience with a particular work task, or even navigational skills within the organization and or their professional network. But we're in a position to understand that there will be differences and to make room for the acceptance through empathy. We're then able to lean into what really strengthens us. The director of NSF says that diversity strengthens us. He's quoted to have said that diversity is America's unique advantage in science and technology. Our global leadership really depends upon diversity, leveraging different backgrounds, experiences, and points of view to bring unique insights to problem solving and discovery. And so, when we're in a position to acknowledge that the diversity is a benefit, and the power of diverse viewpoints is really part of what makes us amazing. We can begin by creating open spaces for discussion about an issue or process that may lead to corrections and improve efficiency. And we're in a position to change how we view conflict, to understand that innovation actually lives at the intersection of diverse ideas and approaches. So, whenever there is a conflict or issue, if the differences are managed properly, they can draw out diverse ideas. They can create synergistic opportunities and foster the development of better relationships on teams and within an organization. So, how do we manage conflict? How do we deal with conflict resolution? And we'll do some reframing, right? There's some essential steps that are recommended for conflict resolution, but I also like you to think about it as conflict transformation, right? There are five steps that are recommended. The first is to address the conflict. Two, clarify the issue causing the conflict. Three, bring the parties involved together to talk. Four, identify a solution. And then five, monitor and follow up. But we'll go through these five so that we can kind of talk about what that would mean in action. The first is to address the conflict. Because conflict sometimes makes us feel really uncomfortable, there's a lack of congruence. We could be in a position where in some organizations and spaces, people will avoid the conflict. But I would suggest that you be proactive when you first suspect something is not correct. Follow the appropriate steps towards conflict resolution and address the problem head on. Because when we pretend that we're unaware of it, it doesn't make the conflict go away. It usually causes it to fester. Number two, you want to be in the business of clarifying the actual issue that's causing the conflict. You want to take the time to find out exactly what's going on. Check your sources, do the research, and do not rely on the company rumor mill. Because it's important when we're trying to resolve a conflict that you approach the right people and ask the right questions, or we can contribute to an escalation of misinterpretations and miscommunication. Number three, you want to bring the parties involved together to talk. Whenever you want to get to the root of any particular problem, you really want to go directly to the source, the two or more parties that are involved in a particular conflict. And it's fine to have the conversation separately to kind of figure out what's the lay of the land, how do we do the work towards conflict resolution. But there has to be a time when everyone is in the same room. And even if you're acting as a mediator, you want to be in a position to allow there to be room for there to be conversation about what the issues are and to help them find healthy solutions. You want to communicate that in this process, we are all being open and positive in the communication, and you want to encourage them to do the same. Because at the end of the day, we want to be in a position to move towards solution generation. And that leads us to number 4. You want to identify a solution because we're in the business of trying to make sure that we can meet the objectives and goals of the organization. The solution has to be the focus. We're striving for a solution, again, that is acceptable for everyone that's involved, that we want to have a win-win scenario where everyone retains their job and that the tension at work is reduced. Practice and help the participants inside the conversation offer compromises or trade offs that they can be happy with while also maintaining their sense of peace. And you want to be in a position from the beginning all the way through this process to let the participants know that the workable solution is the only acceptable outcome, because you want to be in a position to allow everyone to move forward in the work that is at hand. So, as we come to a workable solution, we come to a place of agreement. We allow people then to figure out what they're going to do, right? But it's important whenever we're mediating or we're inside these conflict resolution spaces to monitor and to follow up. It is vital. You want to check back and make sure that the negotiations and whatever that has been come up with as a solution have been honored. Is everyone abiding by the agreement? Are both parties satisfied with the outcomes? And are the boundaries that have been established being observed? If not, when we do monitoring and follow up, we may invite everyone back for another conversation so that we're in a position to address it directly and work towards the escalation of any situation before it actually repeats again. And if we go through these 5 steps, okay, again, addressing the conflict, clarifying the issue that's causing the conflict. 3, bringing the parties together so that we can talk. 4, identifying a win-win solution, and then doing the monitoring and follow-up. Then we're in a position to bring everybody into the room so that we can come up with the workable solution and being able to address if there are any other type of communication barriers within the organization. Because here's our bright idea, is that effective conflict resolution may require revisiting an issue to ensure agreement, because the resolution is the agreement that we can move forward from a particular place. And as a manager, as a mentor, as a supporter, you have to understand that sometimes we will find ourselves in extreme situations where maybe all parties are not in agreement around coming to some type of solution. And in those situations, you may have to consider escalating the situation to another office that may result in demotion or termination. But what we know, though, is that irregardless of how employee friendly or employee centered a organization or business is, if there's more than one person in there with different backgrounds, conflict will arise. And in those environments, if it's managed well, really focusing on how do we support and create communication, you'll see that growth happens naturally when the communication is the priority and the refocusing of the conflict is around solution generation. So I want to thank you so much for completing this. So thank you for joining us in this training. And as promised, you made it to the end. So there is a knowledge check. So there is a link at the bottom of the video, but you also can use this QR code to answer a couple questions around what you learned today. So we thank you again for your time. And this training has been brought to you through the generous support of the National Science Foundation, the Securing STEM Island Pathways, the Seas Island Alliance, and VI-EPSCoR. Have a great day.